Hello everyone. Have you ever wondered why some infectious diseases spread rapidly through an entire community while others disappear after affecting only a few people? Even more importantly, how can we interrupt this spread and protect the population? To answer these questions, we need to understand the dynamics of disease transmission. This is one of the most important concepts in community medicine because every prevention and control strategy is based on understanding how an infectious agent moves from one host to another. Let us begin. For any communicable disease to survive, there must be a continuous chain of transmission. If even one link in this chain is broken, the disease cannot continue spreading. This chain consists of three major components, namely the reservoir or source of infection, the mode of transmission, and the susceptible host. Public health interventions are mainly directed towards identifying these links and breaking them effectively. The first component is the reservoir and the source of infection. Although these terms are often used interchangeably, they are not always the same. The reservoir is the natural habitat where the infectious agent normally lives, grows, and multiplies. It may be a human being, an animal, or the environment. The source of infection is the immediate person, animal, object, or substance from which the infectious agent is actually transmitted to a susceptible host. Sometimes the reservoir and source are identical. For example, in tetanus, both are the soil. In other diseases, they differ. In typhoid fever, humans are the reservoir, whereas contaminated food, water, milk, or feces act as the source of infection. Similarly, in hookworm infection, humans are the reservoir, but contaminated soil containing infective larvae becomes the source. Human beings themselves can act as reservoirs of infection. However, not all infected individuals look sick. This is explained by the iceberg phenomenon. The visible portion of the iceberg represents clinical cases which may be mild, moderate, severe, or fatal. Below the surface lie the much larger hidden portion consisting of subclinical infections, latent infections, and carriers. Subclinical infections are asymptomatic infections that play an important role in maintaining disease transmission because affected individuals continue their daily activities without realizing they are infected. Latent infections contain dormant organisms that do not actively shed the pathogen until reactivation occurs. A classic example is herpes simplex infection. Carriers are individuals who harbor and excrete infectious agents without showing obvious disease. Although they may appear healthy, they are epidemiologically more dangerous because they remain unnoticed and continue spreading infection. Carriers are classified into incubatory carriers, convalescent carriers, healthy carriers, and chronic carriers. Incubatory carriers shed the infectious agent during the incubation period before symptoms develop. Diseases such as measles, influenza, pertussis, poliomyelitis, diphtheria, and hepatitis B may spread in this manner. Convalescent carriers continue to shed organisms during recovery even after clinical symptoms disappear. Examples include typhoid fever, cholera, dysentery, diphtheria, and whooping cough. Healthy carriers never develop symptoms but continue to harbor and spread infection. Examples include poliomyelitis, cholera, meningococcal meningitis, and salmonellosis. Depending on the duration of shedding, carriers are further classified as temporary or chronic carriers. Temporary carriers eliminate the organism within a short period, whereas chronic carriers continue excreting pathogens for months or even years. Chronic carriers are particularly important because they can reintroduce diseases into disease-free areas. Typhoid fever, hepatitis B, malaria, and chronic dysentery are well-known examples. After leaving the reservoir, the pathogen enters a susceptible host through a suitable portal of entry. These portals include the respiratory tract, alimentary tract, genitourinary tract, and broken skin. Once inside the body, the organism reaches its preferred tissue known as the site of election, where it multiplies and causes disease. For transmission to continue, the organism must leave the host through an appropriate portal of exit. This may be through respiratory secretions, feces, urine, blood, skin lesions, or genital secretions. Without a portal of exit, the infection becomes a dead end. As seen in diseases like tetanus, some pathogens also survive outside the body in the environment until they find another susceptible host. The portal of exit often determines the epidemiological importance of the disease. When pathogens leave through the intestinal or urinary tract, they contaminate food and water, resulting in fecal-oral transmission, as seen in typhoid fever. When they leave through respiratory secretions, droplet or airborne transmission occurs, placing healthcare workers, teachers, and close contacts at higher risk. When organisms leave through blood or skin lesions, direct inoculation becomes possible, as seen in hepatitis B and other bloodborne infections. Now let us discuss the different modes of transmission. Transmission may be direct or indirect. Direct transmission occurs immediately from an infected source to a susceptible host without any intermediate vehicle. It includes direct contact droplet infection contact with contaminated soil, inoculation through skin or mucous membrane, and transplacental transmission from mother to child. Indirect transmission requires the pathogen to survive outside the host before infecting another person. It includes vehicle-borne transmission through food, water, blood, and milk vector-borne transmission, airborne transmission through droplet, nuclei, or dust fomite transmission through contaminated objects, and transmission through contaminated hands and fingers. Airborne transmission deserves special attention because it is commonly asked in examinations. Large respiratory droplets are greater than 5 micrometers in size. They travel only a short distance, usually about 30 to 60 centimeters, before settling quickly. Droplet nuclei are much smaller, measuring 1 to 10 micrometers. Because of their small size, they remain suspended in air for long periods and travel over longer distances, reaching the alveoli. Dust particles carrying infectious agents may also become airborne during activities like sweeping, shaking clothes, or making beds. Vector-borne transmission is another important mechanism. Vectors transmit pathogens by several methods, including biting, regurgitation, contamination with infected feces during scratching, and contamination through body fluids when crushed. Vector transmission may be mechanical or biological. In mechanical transmission, the pathogen is simply carried by the vector without undergoing multiplication or development. Houseflies spreading enteric pathogens are a classic example. In biological transmission, the pathogen undergoes multiplication, development, or both within the vector before becoming infective. Biological transmission is classified into propagative, cyclopropagative, and cyclodevelopmental types. In propagative transmission, only multiplication occurs, as in plague bacilli multiplying within rat fleas. In cyclopropagative transmission, both multiplication and developmental changes occur, as in malaria parasites developing within the Anopheles mosquito. In cyclodevelopmental transmission, only developmental changes occur without multiplication, as seen in filarial parasites inside mosquitoes. Some vectors also maintain infection through generations. In transovarial transmission, the infected female vector passes the pathogen directly to her offspring through the eggs. In transstadial transmission, the pathogen survives as the vector develops from one life stage to another, such as from larva to nymph, or from nymph to adult. Disease transmission may involve different infection chains. Some diseases require only humans and vectors, such as malaria. Others require vertebrate animals, plague, and Japanese encephalitis. Certain parasitic infections require 2 intermediate hosts before reaching humans. Fish tapeworm and paragonymous infection are good examples. The first level is disease control. Here, the occurrence of disease is reduced to an acceptable level through continuous public health measures. However, the disease still exists in the community, and ongoing interventions are necessary to keep it under control. Tuberculosis and malaria control programs are good examples. The next level is disease elimination. Elimination means reducing the incidence of a disease to zero in a defined geographical area. Although no new cases occur within that region, the infectious agent may still exist elsewhere. Therefore, surveillance and preventive measures must continue to prevent its reintroduction. Elimination can be regional or national. Maternal and neonatal tetanus elimination in many countries is an example. Beyond elimination is eradication. Eradication means the permanent reduction of the worldwide incidence of an infection to zero through deliberate public health efforts. Once eradication is achieved, routine control measures are no longer required because the disease no longer exists anywhere in the world. Smallpox is the only human disease that has been successfully eradicated. The ultimate goal is extinction, where the infectious agent no longer exists either in nature or in laboratories. This is more of a theoretical concept, and no human pathogen has yet reached true extinction. To achieve these objectives, public health focuses on breaking the chain of transmission at one or more points. The most effective way to control communicable disease is by breaking the chain of transmission. This can be achieved by controlling the reservoir through early diagnosis, treatment, isolation, notification, quarantine, and vaccination. The second approach is interrupting transmission through safe water, food hygiene, sanitation, environmental disinfection, vector control, pasteurization, ventilation, and proper infection control practices. The third approach is protecting susceptible host through improved nutrition, immunization, chemoprophylaxis, and health education. Let us quickly summarize. Communicable diseases spread through an unbroken chain consisting of the reservoir or source mode of transmission and susceptible host. Understanding reservoirs, carriers, portals of entry and exit, direct and indirect transmission, airborne spread, vector-borne transmission, and disease control measures enables us to interrupt this chain effectively. Every successful public health program is built on the principle of identifying and breaking these links before disease spreads further. If this helped you understand dynamics of disease transmission more clearly, hit like, subscribe for more easy to understand public health and epidemiology videos, and leave a comment telling me which epidemiological topic you would like me to explain next. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.